You want to start? I got 15 minutes. That's fine. I'll make something. All right. So while we wait for the guest, I think I'm gonna do a little content beforehand. All right, guys. So we're gonna start a little side commentary. Last week, my 401k lost some money, and it got me sort of thinking about what is my own future going to look like. It's kind of scary, to think about retirement and think about the day that, your parents aren't going to be here. And then it's another thing to also take a look at, where and how your life went and wonder, could I have done something differently? So, in this sense, I think what's best to say in this way is I can't sit here and obviously just focus on the past because it would be counterproductive. It would be counterproductive. What I think would probably be more productive would be at least try your best to plan for the future and just hope for the best. But there's a lot of uncertainty, especially given the fact that the market dipped last week. And we wonder if there's going to be a recession this year. We wonder how long the recession is going to be. We wonder if we're going to be able to hold on to our jobs and our way to make money. We wonder, what happens if I get laid off? What happens to this whole business, that I'm running, which is a podcast and a consulting service? I guess there's almost always going to be a lot of uncertainty. But one thing that I've learned consistently throughout this time is kind of not hope for the best, but maybe try to just manage your emotions a little differently than than in the past. Talk to people, kind of see where it goes. There's only so much that I can do at this point. I mean, there are plenty of great content creators on YouTube that kind of help, ease some of my stress that I can listen to. But the ultimate thing right now that I'm feeling is, how can I create another income, to kind of future proof myself? Is it based off upskilling, or are there ways to start creating little investment income? I guess each day we'll try our best to research and learn that, you know, especially for you, the audience. Today, we're going to have a really awesome guest who's going to teach us about kind of not just a little world of property management, but kind of how to start making our money work for us. Kind of how to start making our money work for us. That's the most important thing that I can tell you guys, especially for those who have autistic children or those who are in my age who are wondering, what can I do for myself to kind of protect myself in the future? Because your job isn't always going to be there, especially now, as revealed to me yesterday by someone I was on a Zoom call with. A lot of the artificial intelligence tools coming out now in the next, year to next 5 years, they're going to make running a business more of a potentially low staff to one to a 2 to 1 man show, that you're not going to need as many people as you once did, like what a real broadcast and production was, higher barrier to entry. While these make it better, what's the world of work going to look like with all these introductions, with artificial intelligence? Are we going to need as many people across industries? I guess we don't know the answer, so it's kind of a brace for ourselves answer. But again, the biggest thing that I can tell you all today, with our guest, is find whatever ways you can. If you believe it's upskilling, then sure, go ahead and upskill. If you believe that, there are ways that you can freelance, do that. If you can you know, create investments, while you're working, do that. There's numerous possibilities. So we'll be back in a short little while with the guest, but I hope you definitely learned something. You in?
Hello.
Hello. Do you want to do video or without video?
Totally up to you. I'm indifferent.
You're indifferent. Good. Let's do without video. I think it'll be more fun this way.
All right, that works for me.
All right. All right, everyone. Welcome to Autism Experience Podcast today. So we're going to learn about real estate, property management, and investing with my guest today, who actually lives in Houston, but had a very interesting path here as an immigrant. Her name is Linda. Well, Linda Holtz now. What was your maiden last name?
Tsacalides.
I would not be able to pronounce that.
That's totally okay. Don't worry about it.
So, first things first. What brought you to the United States of America, which most immigrants view as the land of opportunity? And then, since you are originally from the country of France, where were both your parents from?
Absolutely. I love this question. Nobody ever asked me that, where my parents are from. People always want to know where I'm from. So I was born and raised in France. What got me to move to the US at first was my degree. I was doing a business school at the time, and I was preparing my master's degree, and it was part of my graduation curriculum, I guess, to do a summer session in New York. And I kind of loved it. I kind of decided that I wanted to do my internship in New York the following year, and it was 13 years ago, so I guess I'm still here.
Years ago. So
now to
since
tell you where
there
my
are
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There are dozens of universities in France, because I know the European system is much different, especially in your origin country, France. What was the name of the university you went to in France, and what part of France are you from?
Yes, so I went to a school called ISG. It's basically the what it stands for means it's a management school. And so that was in Paris, but originally I'm actually from a small town next to the border with Switzerland.
Ooh, Swiss banking country. Sorry, but we all know on some level. Listen, Switzerland has produced some amazing products like Swiss Army Knife brand, which is a very well-known, famous brand. But what's the country really, really, really genuinely known for? Where all the rich people in the United States hide their money.
Yeah, that's true.
They have good classic brands. They have they're a very interesting country, being as they speak four different languages there.
Yes.
If I remember correctly, they speak whatever the language is on the border of Germany. They speak French, they speak Italian, and there's one more language in there I'm missing. Remind me.
Yeah, that's right. They do speak a lot of languages. The interesting part to me every time I go is how quickly they switch between languages. So like literally the last time I was there with my husband, um we were there with my cousin and his girlfriend, and obviously my cousin and I speak French, and we were on the German side of the country. So the waitress comes up to us speaking in German. She sees that we're confused, that my cousin and I are speaking French. So she automatically switches to French. And later on, as we're ordering, she realizes that my husband is American, automatically switches to English. I mean, for them, it's just natural.
So you basically code switch.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what the phrase would be on the popular phrase would be on the internet, or else your language skills are that good enough that you're able to pull that off. Because I do know for a fact, especially in Europe, most countries have to speak multiple languages.
That's true. That's very true.
Especially given the fact, just so everyone's clear, I'm wearing an FC Barcelona shirt, and
Ooh.
most players come from different come from almost everywhere, that you can think of. They have to learn the language of the team and the country that they're living in. They have to learn the customs. And there are different players who sometimes learn English, but not all the time.
Yeah.
So since you came from France, the interest, and you are also part of my generation, the millennial generation, what year of the millennials were you born?
I'm a 1990 baby.
1985. I have you by maybe 10 years.
No, 5 years. 1990.
You were 1990. Okay, yes. So that means you're mid 30s. Yeah, I'm 85. So unfortunately, I just put up a post that you'll get a little kick out of after you get off this. But basically, we both know how cringy and annoying social media can get. So as we move on through this, I'm just going to say this. If you were entering the end of your 30s, and put yourself in my shoes for a minute, nobody wanted to hire you. And, you have to deal with three things. In my situation, because the podcast is conveniently named Autism Experience, and I'm sure you've been exposed to it on some level as its developmental learning disability, what would you do if you felt like basically they don't want to work with you because of that, because they think you're too smart, and this is a bias? You're getting to age 40 and you're like, how can I potentially supplement my income? And I'm sure this is a challenge you came across in your career also. Am I correct?
Oh yeah.
So I know you are in property management. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But after the summer in New York, how long did you stay in Brooklyn for?
Oh, so I stayed in Brooklyn. I pretty much left almost right away. So I spent my summer there, then came back in around Thanksgiving time and moved almost right away. Now I came back around springtime and stayed about 2 years, something like that. I
That
I
was
did
in
a
New
little
York,
bit of
right?
like living in New Jersey in between, but yeah, I was working on Wall Street for about 2 years.
What was your first job out of the master's program since you were on Wall Street? What did you do?
Well, that's the funny thing is that our company was located physically on Wall Street, but I actually did
Associa?
no. Associate came way after. At the time, I actually did door-to-door sales.
Ah, our U.S. Conservative Party's favorite type of a job, door-to-door sales, because all the old people always sat there and basically said, "You want to really learn about yourself? Do door-to-door sales and get a door shut in your face."
That's it's not untrue.
It's not untrue, but I will say this much, especially because I was a business manager also. Unfortunately, what most people don't understand is that sales is not for everyone.
That's correct.
like that was the biggest thing with me towards the end of last decade. When I was finishing up my degree before my mid 30s, I had to make a decision because the only jobs that would literally come up to me or have any interest in looking at my resume were those sales jobs. Unfortunately, those sales jobs have the following problems: no benefits, really annoying hours, but you get access to a mentor, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it also has to be the right fit for you.
Absolutely. Yep.
And not everyone likes those jobs, which is why I'm guessing. How long did you stick with that for?
I did that for a little bit over 2 years. I think two and a half.
2.5. And then what made you decide you wanted to do something else?
I got burned out basically because, like you said, it's not easy hours. So basically, for almost 3 years, I was on the field, either door to door, or there were certain campaigns that I did where we were literally fundraising from the street. And then eventually, I was recruiting on the phone. And yeah, I did all of those for combined 3 years, and burnt out and wanted to do something different, something a little more stable financially at the time. And that's how I found my way to property management.
Now, I'm going to make a little comment because unfortunately, I think this is something our generation does still, some accept, most don't. I once lied to myself to believe that there is such a thing as stability, and now, as we're seeing, there is no such thing,
Yeah, correct.
which is really sad and pathetic because when I look at my parents, are your parents baby boomers? That would be 1946 to 1964.
No, they came after that. Like they were the
So they are
generation
Gen
in
X
between.
parents.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. Because in Europe, many people start families younger. This is unfortunately something you probably learned over here, which is what we like to call an American thing. And just for fun note, 2 years ago, back in 2023, before my best friend's wedding, who I served as groomsman with, this is a little fun story. One of the bachelors and the groomsmen brought one of his buddies who's Albanian from Europe. The guy literally told me, "We get married younger, so you're not going to see somebody at age 38 like you do over here getting married."
At least not if it's their first, typically.
No, and that's why I made the comment to you that that's a European thing, because that's also a Latin American thing, where I always thought, for some reason, at least in European standards, I always thought that, mid 1950s boomers were having millennial kids. And then I apparently learned the older the boomer is, the more likely they had a Gen X child, which was
Mm-hmm.
1965 to 1980. What I didn't realize is the Gen Xers were having the millennials in Europe, which is interesting, but not all that surprising because I feel like people's maturity in Europe is probably much different and more understandable than over here. Like you were drinking alcohol from a young age, whereas here in America, wow, you can't drink that till you're 21 because you're not responsible.
Yeah, I mean it's very interesting, especially for me coming from a different country when I was 22 at the time. I always tell people I was never an adult in my country. So I very much had that experience of growing up with a certain culture, but then as an adult, experiencing something completely different. So for example, on the alcohol thing, I never really drank like that. So for me, when I got
Well, no,
here,
because you're taught to drink alcohol probably in a responsible manner in European
mm-hmm,
countries. That's the other
yes,
thing. Because over
exactly.
here, the problem with our country is, let's be really honest. And I don't know what your affiliation is, or whether you're an American citizen, or if and how you voted, whether you're in this country. But I do notice one thing here in all the years that I've lived here. Most people, no matter who you vote for, are not exactly some are responsible, others are not. Others have, certain beliefs that they wear on their sleeve, others don't. When I do something like a podcast, one thing I've especially learned with, our with this large community of people who are real estate investors is certain things I will not just assume somebody did X, Y, and Z. Like I had a very interesting person on a phone call yesterday from the commercial real estate sector. This guy's name is Ira. So he's an Orthodox Jew, and he asked me yesterday, how do I feel about, the first few months of the Trump administration? So I answered
Hmm.
him like this. I said, but I told him the following. My 401k went to crap last week at the end of the week. So I'm not happy,
Hmm.
which should basically give you away the fact that I did not vote for Trump, but I'm willing to basically talk to people in a respectful manner while doing a podcast because I understand we all have different beliefs, but we all have to be, nice to each other.
Oh, I agree with that. That is definitely something that you and I are on the same page with, is that at the end of the day, to each their own belief system and values and all that. But we still have to be nice to each other. 100%.
Well, we do. And to be honest, here's the biggest thing with immaturity in this country. I know plenty of women around your age and my age who, if they found out, for example, I didn't vote for Kamala Harris, guess what I would have gotten called? From living in a couple different areas how intolerant people are, but it's like what they don't understand is we have different circumstances. That's exactly what I said to the call yesterday, which is let's respect the fact that everyone is in a different circumstance and everyone has their reasons.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes the world such a beautiful place, is that if we were all the same, then what would be the fun in that?
Yeah, exactly. And, I have this friend up in Boston. Pretty much every day he's complaining to me about, the US president's doing this, the US president's doing that. And I'm like, dude, I get what your real problem is right now. Your real problem is you're worried about your job. But guess what? Unfortunately, because you were born in 1980, just like you and I are 5 years apart, and he's 5 years apart from me. Here's what he didn't understand. And it's not his fault. He never got told the concept of what I hate with LinkedIn is the focus on upskilling, because I feel like upskilling is just a nice little way of basically saying there are no jobs for people like, you and me right now. So we're unfortunately tied to our industries. You're in real estate, I'm in healthcare. I would like to definitely for sure, get into your industry on some level, but we also don't know how badly this country's tariff policies are going to hurt the hiring in that industry,
Hmm.
especially because your industry probably imports lumber from other places, right? So now what are we going to do?
So now what are we gonna do? Yeah, that is definitely a question that I think is on people's mind a lot these days.
Especially in your industry, because nobody uses the lumber we do. We export lumber out of this country when we cut those trees down, and then it's turned into paper products that gets exported. Just like I know your mother originally is from Congo. I don't know exactly what's the top natural resource in Congo. Is
Cobalt.
it oil?
No, it's cobalt. It's what they use to make batteries, phone batteries.
Oh, you guys are a mineral mine. Oh, geez, I'm
That's right.
thinking blood diamond. Remember
Unfortunately,
the nine?
yes.
Remember the mid 2000s movie with Leonardo DiCaprio that talked about the diamond trade?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the one.
yeah, that one. So basically, everybody's diamond engagement rings is your country.
Hmm.
Sorry to say that, but there's truth to that. But it's like when you look at the map of Africa, originally, unfortunately, everybody else's other country ran out of their natural resources. So what did they do next? They turned their attention to the largest continent of countries in the world.
Yes.
You just gotta love how people can't manage their resources properly. I mean, even look at this country. if you go back and read our history carefully after 1776, what did we mess up in the 1800s? Our natural resources.
Mm.
Right after the Civil War, especially because you lived in Chicago, if you studied that part of American history carefully, we had to go westward because the South, where you live, literally all the farmland was destroyed. So we had to move out west for everything, and especially with, trains and oil. So what happens now a century later? Oh, yeah, we're out of oil.
Yeah, I wish we could learn some more from history.
We don't learn from history. I mean, here's a good one for you. Even last week, you saw that giant meme about what happens about how it was almost 100 years before somebody did all around tariffs.
Oh, I did not see that one, no.
If you, I'll give you a little tip. If you study U.S. history in the 1920s, at the Great Depression, when President Hoover proposed all around tariffs and passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff, guess what happened? The Great Depression.
Mm.
The idea was to, like what's going on now, where they sold it as, let's correct the market, only it didn't happen. But what are you going to do? So,
What are you going to do indeed? We're bound to repeat what we don't take the time to understand.
yes, because nobody wants to, because that's the thing that you and I probably get on some level. We read history and we read history for understandings.
Mm-hmm.
Like what we're dealing with now, robber baron 2.0, tech. Who was the first robber barons? Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt,
Mm.
and they all needed each other for something, just like Bill Gates gave everybody else Microsoft and the technology. Another topic for another day. But anyway, so you left door-to-door sales and decided to go to Associa.
Yes.
What are their services?
They are a nationwide property management company.
So they're a national franchise, is what we would call
Ye-
that.
Yes, they actually are headquarters here in Texas too. But I worked for them in Chicago.
What drew you to Chicago at first?
It was just where I landed at the time when I was still doing sales. I moved in six different states my first 2 years here in the US. Well, my first 3 years, I guess, because Chicago was the sixth one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I lived a little bit in New Jersey, Philly, obviously New York, Texas too,
Yeah, so
actually,
you've
when I
lived in
moved
a few
back.
different places.
Yeah,
So did you meet Connor in Chicago, which is your husband who you guys started married to real estate with, or was that when you moved to Houston?
that was Chicago. He's a true Chicago boy.
So what made you two go down to Houston and him leave Chicago?
It was a couple of different reasons, but real estate was a big one. We had already started investing, and we knew that we wanted to continue doing that. He also has family down here, and since I had lived here during my sales days, I was familiar with Houston in particular. And then after that, it was all the reasons, we moved in 2021. So all the reasons why everybody was doing a mass exodus to the South. Uh, Cost of living, better weather, all that kind of good stuff.
Now, I'm gonna throw shade on that just to be funny. What happens when
Okay,
everybody from the north goes down south? Now they got to build.
exactly.
So what happens now? Cost of living actually goes up instead.
And that's what we're seeing in certain markets. That's why, certain markets that were hot a couple of years ago maybe are a little harder to enter nowadays, or it's a little harder to make numbers work.
Well, there's that. My sister graduated from UT Austin. She's young. She's much younger than you. She was 1993 or 1994. One of those.
Hmm.
I completely forgot when, but she would have just turned 30. She went to school at University of Austin and graduated in 2013. So she was able to basically live in Austin at that time, and she's
Oh
always
wow.
loved Texas. Now, I was there for the wedding in 2022 with her fiance that she met during COVID. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoy Texas, but there's a few reasons I wouldn't move down there. Number
Oh, tell
one,
me.
no, first reason, I don't like the fact that you need a car and everything is 30 minutes, you know, within 20 to 30 minutes of one another.
Yes,
So
we agree on that. That is definitely one of the things that I don't
they
enjoy
have a
either.
your state, don't take this personal. They do not want to invest in public transit. I get it. It is one of the largest states because it was once part of Mexico and they wanted their freedom from Mexico back at the 1820s. So they got their freedom from Mexico by the 1850s. Now, again, I don't have a problem with that because it is the largest state here in the country, but they don't the governor himself won't even invest in public transit.
That's true. Here in
And
Houston, public transportation is basically non-existent unless you're
well,
like
yeah,
downtown.
because that's one of the they barely have it in Austin. That's reason number one. Reason number two, my salary up here, which is probably which was just 1,000 from making 50K last year. It wouldn't it I don't buy the notion that I would do better down there in Texas because with the idea of needing a car, it's going to add up to the same costs
Mm,
as living up here in New York. The only the big things that keep me here are mother, friends, uh, mother, friends, work. But in all honesty, my state, for as much as everyone complains about the cost of living and did mass exodus to the south, does invest in public transit.
yeah, no, trust me. If we had public transportation here, like it is in Chicago or in New York City, it would be a totally different game for sure.
Yeah, but unfortunately, your state needs a younger governor to do that. This current governor will not do that.
Like
Or
you said,
maybe
it's one of the largest states, so I guess I understand why it would be hard. But yeah,
I
definitely public
understand why it
transportation
would be
is.
hard, but I also think if it was sold correctly, you could make a lot of people's lives easier.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's see. Now since the company you work for now, is that still Associa down there or someone else?
No, I work for someone else now. Like my day job, you mean?
Yeah, day job.
Yeah, I work for someone else.
What's the name of the current company?
I work for PC5 company.
All right. So now
So
married
shout
to
out to
real
them.
estate.
Yes.
Married to real estate. Now, what was the idea behind this? And also, how did you and Connor start to be able to invest in properties? Let's hear that story.
For sure. So our first property was actually a triplex in Chicago, and we were able to acquire that one because we did an FHA loan. So for anybody who's not familiar, that means that we only had to put down 3.5% to as a down payment.
Did you go through NACA, NACA?
No, no, it was just regular. And so it was actually FHA 203K, which means that we only had to bring down 3.5%, but we also had an allowance. I think the maximum was 50K at the time, if I remember correctly, for upfront renovation. So obviously nothing where was going to be down to the studs, but we were able to do some cosmetic renovations like new painting in the units, some HVAC work to bring some washer dryer in every unit. And what else? I think we did some flooring work, and yeah, that was about it. Under the loan, that's all we did. And then we did more work later on ourselves. And that's how we got started. That was the first property.
How many units were in the triplex?
So it was three, but we lived in one. So we rented two.
How much did you rent the two out for?
Ooh, that's a good question. At the time, I think it was something like 1100 and 1300. I think. Honestly, I would need to go back to double check if you wanted to be sure, because that was all the way 5 years ago.
Right, and now prices are completely different.
True.
And 11, 1300, was that considered what we would deem as affordable for rent in the area at that time, or had prices already gone up in Chicago because Chicago's about equal with New York?
No, it's not equal yet. At least not from what I remember of New York City. It was a good rent amount for Chicago because of the fact that it was all the way up north. To give you an idea, when I lived, so those units were both of them were 3 bedrooms, 1 bath. And when I lived by myself in a 1 bedroom, 1 bath in Lincoln Park, which is much closer to like the Loop, I paid 1700 for one. So those units were definitely, because of the age of the house and because it was a little further up north, that's why it was a little lower.
Ah, interesting. All right, so married to real estate. Now, this idea was started after the first triplex, right? What exactly is married to real estate? So I have a
Yes,
better
so
understanding.
absolutely. So basically we when we moved down here, we moved right after selling the triplex. And we knew we wanted to continue doing real estate. So at first we wanted to buy more triplexes, but it's not as easy to find here, which we didn't realize at the time.
Well, no,
Um,
Texas is actually building more now, from what I remember, and they're not building necessarily triplexes. They're building everything.
Correct. That's a very good way to put it. And so
The
at first
webinar
that
you
meant,
had me on recently, even that structure looked very interesting.
I'm sorry, which structure?
The webinar you invited me to,
Oh yeah.
that retail structure looked very interesting. So is that what the
Yes.
future is going to look like?
No, so this one actually kind of happened by accident. So basically, when we got down here and realized that there weren't as many triplexes, in a roundabout way, we found our way into multifamily. And because we both had background in property management, we decided to go all in on that. So that's at that point that we created Married to Real Estate, because in the meantime, we had just gotten married. And it just so happened that we were working with a team on a big apartment complex with hundreds of units, and that deal kind of fell through. But then they presented us the one that you saw in the webinar, and it was just good timing. So we were like, you know what, let's give it a try. So it was completely by
And
accident that we entered
unfortunately,
the.
it's funny because I really liked the idea. I want to do something like that. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, what my income was, that's probably not necessarily realistic, at least right now, until, you know, as I just had Andrew Rosenberg on here a couple of weeks ago, we discussed something very interesting, which you might agree with. Doing some, call my podcast a digital house. I need to find ways to get this to monetize because it's still building a house like you're, investing into triplexes, or, like that's what you once did. But once I'm able to generate money into the digital house, then I could be doing things like that. It just stinks because, when you see things like that you really want to do because of the fact that it presents a passive income, not everyone has that right away. It
Mhm.
sucks.
Yeah, no, trust me, I completely agree. Our first investment into like commercial, I actually did from a life insurance policy, because you're right, it's not always everybody
It's
who has
high
the cash lined up.
bias. It's hot.
Hmm.
I listen. I completely understand why. I don't throw the real estate industry under the bus for it because clearly most of the industry, a lot of these lawyers are geniuses with how they, you know, and I'm not going to use the word manipulate the system. Developers probably go to lawyers to have things written and implemented a certain way because you have to serve a higher client. yet that has the kind of money to be able to do it in the first place or has access to large scale capital. I understand that, but it sucks for the common person because I have a very close friend in Toronto, Canada, which is one of the most expensive parts of Canada, who always asks me, how come none of these creators ever talk about how for people like you and me, we can get into real estate? I'm like, we're not necessarily their target market. That's the problem.
Mm.
And, and there's another phrase that my CTO loves to tell me, but even when it comes to college, everybody's got terms. It's about finding the right way into something. If you want to do something, you'll figure out how to do it bad enough. Like, for example, I'll tell you one thing where I disagree with him on that. If I could go back to when I was in my early to mid 20s, I would have, instead of gone to college, found ways to try to maybe at that age invest into real estate, at least have that under my belt, and go to college later, because too many of us at a younger age are tricked into borrowing for college and then we can't pay that back, but none of us are allowed to have loans to like run a property.
Mm. Well, you know what they say, it's never too late.
No, of course it's not. It's just about finding the right way in. I mean, with you guys, since I don't know if you count as a syndicate or not, how do you get people like me into these deals in the first place who don't have the income? Like, what are the ways in, if you wanted to tell our audience?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on the deal. There are deals that are open to non-accredited investors, and there are deals where it's only accredited investors.
So what
Typically,
I was on, that was for an accredited investor, right?
it started as non-accredited, but then eventually it was moved over, correct? So by the time you did that webinar, it was accredited only.
Damn. So I gotta wait for you to find me a non-accredited one to be able to come into, sort of just like fun, like what I'm doing with Fundrise. 20 bucks every 2 weeks.
Yes,
As
but
money becomes available, even though that's a real estate investment trust. It's a start, it's a way in, as people like Dan would say.
I will say, the thing about if you're not accredited is that you have to have a pre-existing relationship with the person that you're going to invest with. So that's definitely the first tip that I would give everyone is network, because that's how you're going to find access to the best opportunities, whether you're accredited or not. But if you're not accredited, you're going to need to have those relationships anyway. Otherwise, you won't be able to get on, even if you had the money.
Right. And it's funny because Andrew's founding partner at his investment fund, at his hedge fund that he now serves on in a executive role, Chris from Canada, actually said, for us, even just to invest through us, you would need to be an accredited investor with at least 50,000 in the bank.
Typically, that 50,000 is the minimum for most deals I've seen. Yes.
But now what's the minimum for a non-accredited?
It depends on the deal. The it depends on the team, and I'm sorry. The team who finds the deal and decides to go and raise capital for it can decide what the minimum is. But for non-accredited, it usually starts at 25,000.
25,000. Okay, that's definitely interesting to know that we're talking 2 5 with 3 zeros, right?
Yes, correct. But again, if you're gonna go that route, you need to have the pre-existing relationship. Otherwise, you could tell them, I even have 50, it won't work.
Right, understandable, because they want to understand that you know, we're legitimate.
Well, it's not even that, it's because it's a rule of the SEC. When it comes to syndications, we cannot accept funds from someone who's not accredited unless we have a pre-existing relationship with them.
Fair enough. So yes, but obviously, since now you and I are doing this, and I have been on a webinar, there's somewhat of a relationship. So depending on the circumstances, it could work.
Yeah, true. You and I know each other now. So yeah, we have known each other. So there shouldn't be a problem. If I did a deal tomorrow where you wanted to get on and you were ready, like I said, whether it was cash or life insurance policy or retirement account, you could jump on because I know you.
Interesting question. I have a term life insurance policy.
Mhm.
You through who the heck is the term life through? Uh, I'm trying to remember who my term life is through. Just give me a second.
Mhm.
How would I go borrow the money through a term policy to do that?
So the funny thing is, because that's how I did mine. Literally, you just go. I don't know how your policy is set up, but for me, I have an app where I can see it whenever I want. And I didn't even know was possible until the guy who helped me set up the policy, I told him about the fact that I wanted to invest. And he
Northwest
told me,
Mutual.
I'm sorry,
I have Northwest Mutual term life.
you have another question, you said?
No, my policy is through Northwest Mutual.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, mine is national, so it's not, it's a different one.
I also have
But
I have a universal whole life policy through Transamerica for
okay.
myself.
So what you can
So
try, I know for me, what I did was I went on the app, but I'm sure it would have been the same on the website or by calling them. I just requested a loan. I entered the amount, and within 3 days, the money was in my bank account, like literally my checking account. And then from there, I could invest in whatever I wanted.
so that could be a possible way in for me with you through that because then I would be able to pay the policy back, right?
Correct. But you have to be okay with whatever interest they're going to charge you. Like I know, for example, for me, when I did that, my insurance policy was going to charge me 4% to borrow the funds. But I was going to invest in a deal where the average annual return was 23%. So that was a 19-point gap that I was okay with because I basically became my own bank.
Right. And that's something clearly you're kind of getting the impression I might think about doing myself because I will call Northwest and figure out what all these terms are, for something in the future, just so I know for myself. And you're right, we all hate paying interest back, that's for sure. Like I don't like credit card interest, but if I can grow something through you and then get returns on it and then have extra cash for myself, this would be one way in.
Correct. Yes. And I can, and the reason I know is because I've done it myself. So I am
Right.
literally in a
And I
deal right now
appreciate
where I
you
did that.
sharing this with me and my audience because it is a very interesting thought because look, listen, I'm like you at one point. I still complain at certain times. I hate when I have to make the monthly payments for, the insurance policies, but then I remember, oh, wait a second. This is here if I need it for something.
Yeah. And trust
I
me,
mean,
when I opened my policy 7 years ago, well, 8 years ago now, I
you took a
never would have
policy?
thought that fast forward, this is what I would use it for. But I was very happy to have made those monthly payment when it was time to do that investment.
Yeah, because I've had that term life policy, I think, since 2022 or before that. I've been paying it it was either 2021 or 2022. I only took out the policies finally when I got my current opportunity that I work with right now because I knew I could afford the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're going into unsure. We don't know what with the administration now, what the next 4 years are going to look like. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep my current job, with the tech advances, but I may get fortunate enough. But I have to start looking into the possibility now, especially, you can think about this also, but you don't necessarily have to. It sort of sucks for me with the whole age thing. I have to start thinking about what can I do that's going to have me, bringing in money because there's one creator on LinkedIn. I think we're going to end, with this today. We're going to end discussing the cringe on LinkedIn. Honestly, one of my connections who I tagged frequently just got she got basically called out by a different commenter. I made a point to her today, and I'll read this to you and you might find this interesting. I'm not going to reveal who the person is, but you've seen the
Okay.
name before.
Okay.
So hold on. Let's have a little bit of fun because honestly,
I'm
I'm
ready.
sure you have the same thoughts I do about LinkedIn content on a daily basis. It's like, what are you people talking about?
Yes, I sure do.
We all do. I mean, that's something I think Dan pointed out to me. Hold on.
Dan is a wise man.
Oh, listen, I'm going to tell you something. This is the man that I count as my first mentor in podcasting. He's the one who literally kicked me in the ass, pushing me to do this. And I probably shouldn't say ass on a podcast, but it's my show, so I can say whatever I want.
That's right.
Okay. Her post started out like this. Kind of typical generic salesy, but basically, once upon a time, I used to think people only wanted to change jobs to earn more money. However, as I gained more experience in the workforce, I realized that there are other significant factors that drive people to switch careers. You know, we all think, especially with younger millennials, that everyone changes because of money, but everyone has different reasons, like mental health, you know, at the root of it, they want more money or they get stuck in a position like me. And then you get situations like mine where I'm not being given basic permission to move past the interview stage over this whole craving of over this whole push toward new training, things before. Oh no, this wasn't the post. Hold on. It was actually, I think, was it this one from yesterday? Or was it the other one
Oh,
from three
looking for the
days ago?
post.
Hold on. I will find it. Hold on. No, that wasn't the one. Basically, the guy who called her out. Oh,
Oh
here it
boy.
is. All right, perfect. Here it is. Job seekers receiving six-figure salary job offers are not always qualified. It gave out 6 tips, but this was my comment. I'm going to make an observation. They also likely have less to worry about in life as far as preparation goes, or aren't being pressured by external factors. Preparation is important, but also being in livable circumstances is easier. This is why people typically win at job interviews. So the author basically said, keep preparing yourself for your next level in your career. The guy underneath basically said, how dare you be dismissive of a very valid point?
Ooh.
So basically, what I'm getting to within something like this is my big issue with LinkedIn that I'm sure you've said to yourself before. Why is it these creators get very, it's not sales. It's like when you come to the country as an immigrant and you have one set of experiences, why don't you sit there and realize that people who are natively born in this country might not be having the same experience as you did?
Yeah.
For example, this country loves to hire people from other countries because they'll take certain salary levels, or what they think is a appropriate salary. But then someone like me just wants to make a little more than what I'm making right now, but gets called greedy, for example.
Yeah. I see what you
I'm
mean.
like, I'm not as complicated as I look. But once you get to your 40s, especially now, where am I young? Sure. Are you young? Sure. But is our time the same now? You're in your mid 30s. I'm about to become 40. Is my time the same as the 24-year-old college student coming out?
Yeah, no, it's not.
Unfortunately, we have to also accept as a country that everybody's time is significantly different. But once you start to hit your 30s, you have to be very careful with your time.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Because the mid 20-year-old can basically make a huge financial mistake and come back from it, but if you and I invest in a bad deal and I just took that money from a life insurance policy, now I'm stuck paying back on interest.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm glad that we did this today because, now there's at least ability for us to be able to work something out since I would be under the non-accredited aspect. And now that you taught me that little trick, the only other question I would ask is if I wanted to go into multifamily uh rental, would it be wise to do that, or would I just be better off investing in one of these deals to kind of start off?
So you mean if you wanted to buy one yourself, like a smaller one, like a triplex, like I did, for example?
Yes. Would you suggest that now or wait till I have, or would you say go into maybe like go into passive investing first and build your money that way?
To me, it goes back to what your goals are. 100%. Everybody, I cannot answer that for anybody because everybody's situation is different. But I will tell you what I told somebody. Actually, I had this conversation recently with a friend of mine, and I told her, for me, my situation is where I am in life right now, that I would always prefer to have a smaller percentage of a much bigger pie, and also not have to be the landlord. So that's why I made the choice that I made, is because I was a landlord for the last 5 years, and I basically got burned out. I was a property manager for the last 10, and actively self-managing my renters for the last 5, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. So between that and between the fact that I wanted to be able to have um like be part of having more units, be part of owning bigger assets, even if my percentage was smaller, that's why I made that choice. But I think that for everybody, it has to be an individual choice that's made. Do you want to self-manage? Do you have what you need for a down payment, as opposed to having what you need to invest in syndication? Those are all questions that every individual has to look at their own wallet and the amount of time that they want to spend on their real estate journey, basically.
So, with passive investing, the question that I would probably leave now with is how much money, how much of a return does the money generate, and is the money available to use through accounts? And then, how much of the profit goes to the investor in terms of
So
dollars?
yes, every deal is different, right? Typically, the a good deal, right? I like to tell new investors something that's neither great nor terrible. You're gonna about double your money every 3 to 5 years. But you have to remember something very important. Those are projections. Number one, you have to do your due diligence. That means you have to vet the team, you have to vet the operator. But number two, at the end of the day, it's an investment. It's subject to the market. And yes, it may be less volatile than stocks, for example, but we see what happens when things like COVID happen, or the '08 crisis, or so, like, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. Again, it goes back to, should you buy for yourself or should you buy as part of a syndication? Well, how much tolerance do you have for risk? Again, for me, I was okay with taking a little bit more risk, and that's another reason why I went into syndication. But some people might think that when I bought a triplex at 29 years old and was going to manage it by myself in Chicago, that was risky. I didn't think so, but everybody's different. So those are all the questions that you have to ask yourself, in my opinion, is how much time do you want to spend, how much money do you have, and how much tolerance do you have for risk? And
And I
then
feel like,
once you know those answers, always remember that at the end of the day, it's an investment. Whether it's a syndication or a property that you're buying yourself, the real estate market is something to study and to understand.
it's very interesting, especially because my mind has opened up a lot just being able to talk to people within the community. Try discussing this with your family in my situation and then get looked at as crazy.
Me too, trust
Like
me.
I tried to talk about some of the stuff with my sister before she got married in 2022. She was like, "No, you're crazy. Discuss that with dad." I'm like, "Okay, basically you're telling me to screw off. I get it. You're a loss."
But you see, it's funny because to me, for example, I don't understand Bitcoin. I don't understand crypto.
I don't
So to me,
understand Bitcoin. Do you want to know something? I have money put into Bitcoin and crypto through M1. I I put in up to $100 2 years ago. After 2 years, it grew to 200. It grew to 240. Now with the markets crashing, it's down to 200.
hmm,
Bitcoin is volatile. You're right. And our generation supposedly loves Bitcoin, but neither of us really understands it. I've learned more about real estate, passive investing. These are things that I understand that are traditional and easy. It takes a lot of time to understand, but through my podcast, through talking with everyone like Dan in the community, I've gained a better understanding that I feel like this wouldn't be a bad idea for me to
yes.
because I understand it now. I understand it through Amy, who posts a lot of content, and that's somebody else who I completely look up to because not just with her story, but the way she puts forward content. Yes, I have Stash, I have Funrise, I have my 401k and my 403b. But with the markets volatile right now, you need other things to invest in to kind of not necessarily just hedge it, but just make sure you're safe and not all in one area.
Mm. And so that's why, like, it's great. Like you said, you've done your research and now you feel like you understand it better. That's what everybody should do is do your research on yourself and on whatever you want to invest in before making any decision. And again, like I said, if you do decide to go with real estate, vet the deal, vet the operator. Don't go into it just looking at like being blinded by projections and thinking like, oh, this is what my money is gonna do for sure. Okay, let me go in. Like, no, make sure that the team that you investing with has the experience to back up the projections that they give you. Make sure that the area is a good one. All of those things are important, and that's why you have to know what you're doing.
Right. And now that I've at least sat down with you separate from your webinar, you are definitely someone now like Dan in my circle who I would trust to do this and let me know. I will do my diligence with my Transamerica and my Northwest Mutual policies just to do the research. We'll stay in touch about that because I think, I vetted you and I can probably gain a trust level with you since you're in the industry also. You looked at my resume and we'll stay in touch because there is a way for me to, go in with you. It'll just take the right deal.
Absolutely. You know where to find me.
Of course. All right. Thank you for stopping by. And even though, of course, obviously, I had this running for almost half an hour beforehand, it'll just take editing to cut down to this portion of it. I appreciate you coming by and take care. We'll see you soon. All right. If
Sounds
you want
good.
to
You
come,
too.
if you want to come back and do panel discussions on real estate and other topics, I would more than definitely appreciate that because I'll be planning more of those and I'm even planning some real estate content, which I would like you to be a part of. All right.
Yeah,
Have a good night.
absolutely. I would love that. You
All
too.
right.
Bye.
All right. Bye.